Hi everybody, I'm Sarah, I'm the CEO of Dynamic Boards, and today I am here with Caroline and Andy from the board of B3Living. We advertise non-exec roles from right across the UK, and one of the roles that's live at the moment is a role to join the board of B3Living as a non-exec director. They're particularly looking for someone that would bring expertise in technology, digital transformation, data, and cyber risk. You'd be joining the group board, but also joining the Audit and Risk Committee. So Andy and Caroline, thank you so much for joining me. And we'll kick off with, how would you describe the culture of the B3Living board, and what kind of behaviours are most valued around the board table?
I think I would describe the culture as welcoming, supportive, friendly, engaged, open, but underneath there is that steely intent and quiet confidence that the people around the board table are well read, they're well prepared, and they ask good quality challenges and questions. So underneath that welcoming, there is the steely bit about the customer focused purpose of the board and putting the customer at the centre of everything we do, and making sure that we are holding the executive to account. I think it's strategically aligned, which is always a good place to be for a board. So there are no divisive groups, and I think the board takes collective responsibility and accountability. So very much a line of one.
So what does good challenge look like on this board, particularly for a NED?
I'll say good challenge for a non-exec director at B3Living. For me, it's been around a culture of high support and high challenge. I joined the board about 5 years ago, and admittedly, I found it quite intimidating because I'd never had a NED role before. So sometimes you might feel like, am I asking the right questions? Is that a daft question? But what I quickly learned is that no question is a daft one. Often it's the thing that is the obvious thing to say, to ask. And it's often putting yourself in the shoes of the customer and asking, what would it look and feel like to them? Or asking for a bit more assurance. And what was really comforting when I joined the board is that I felt safe to do so. And there's lots of opportunities to fill your gaps in any knowledge or experience in different ways, whether it's a structured induction process, having a buddy. And what I found really invaluable is getting out and about to meet customers, whether it's site walkabouts or joining insight panels and so forth. So it's very much around being able to feel comfortable, challenging, but also being in an environment where you feel supported to do so.
So glad you've had such a good experience, Caroline. That's great for people to hear, particularly if this is your first NED role. Andy, can you think of any examples where a NED has constructively influenced a major decision?
Yeah, we had a good discussion recently when we were looking at the potential of a stock acquisition from another housing association. And I think there were mixed views around the table. So that led to a very sort of balanced discussion, thinking around the positives, thinking around the opportunities, thinking around the risks, what further information was needed to make an informed decision. And when that came, there were still differing views around the table, and that led us to be able to make a much better quality decision. We did, in the end, decide that we would progress, but hearing views from others was really valuable in terms of making sure we did make the right decision. So I think that's a good example. And not following, being prepared to actually stand for your own values, stand for your own thought process, stand for what you believe in, and be able to articulate that in an environment that is safe, where people are, encouraged to say that and be respected for their views. And at the end of the day, if there are different views, we have to come to a decision. But then the ability to be able to say, okay, I've made my point. We're now progressing, so I will now tuck in. I will be a line of one, and I will take collective responsibility and accountability for that decision. And that's the right way of how we should be managing, good challenge in the board, and how NEDs can really influence, major things that are going on in the industry.
So this role, this non-exec, you've asked for them to have that sort of tech digital transformation kind of background. Why is that so important for B3Living right now?
I would say that data in particular is of significant importance across the housing sector. You've got issues affecting us such as Arab's Law, cybersecurity, and that's the need to understand how the homes that we manage are performing. At B3Living, we are going through a process of significant improvement and changes around our data to strengthen that, updating our legacy systems. But what I think we need to do next is thinking about how does that work for us in the future, and how does that work for the improvement of our services to customers? How can we get better insight into our customers and bring those different data sets together? At B3Living, we've got quite a traditional customer base. They like calling us. We're very local. We've got a good understanding of what they're like, but that may not be the same profile of customers that we have well into the future, where there might be expectations to be able to do and access services digitally, but in a way that works for them, while still having the choice to contact us in any way that works for them, be it coming in to see us, picking up the phone, or so forth. So it's really helping to make sure that those behind the scenes investments make improvements for our customers. So we're really excited about this.
What sort of questions or challenges do you expect the successful candidate to bring in their first year on the board?
I think much of that is around scope, because as Caroline has articulated, it's going to be a key focus for us going forward in the next few years. And so the opportunity is here and now about how we actually scope those projects, how we begin to get our systems all working together for the good of the customer and improving our customer services. So we have to think about the future as well, and about things like, I mean, AI is going to be a classic example, isn't it, as we go forward into the future. We've got lots of information kicking around. You know, we've got stock surveys, we've got customers' feedback, we've got tenant satisfaction measures, we've got complaints. But how do they all come together? How do we correlate all those together in such a way that we can begin to predict, you know, what our homes and what our customers will need in the future, so we can begin to become forward thinking rather than reactive all the time? You know, a classic for me would be around repairs. If certain homes need certain repairs at certain times, then surely we can look at our systems and our AI and be able to predict which other homes will need that in the future, and therefore get ahead of the game and start doing things before they actually start falling apart. And that's going to be a great service for our customers and indeed for our homes.
How does the board balance ambition around digital transformation with risk, regulation and value for money? It's getting Andy smiling.
I just had one thought on this. So I'll say there's an element around risk when it comes to digital and data. And one of the things that I recall the board having a discussion around is prioritising the security and safety of our data and our systems. And when it comes to procuring new systems, how can we get the best of breed? How can we get something that is off the shelf and standardized as much as possible? We wouldn't necessarily want to take the risk in going for something where we build it ourselves. We want to make sure that we're taking advantage of what's the products that are best in the market, and seeing that as a safer option as we update our approach.
And what kind of skills and perspectives do you think will really help someone add value quickly on the board?
I would say it's the ability to translate what could come across as intimidating IT language and jargon into something that is plain English and makes sense, and that is accessible for everyone, and to help us to make practical choices. What does that look like and what works for us? And it may not necessarily be the same as other organisations. I'd also say it's somebody that's got a customer mindset, not getting into the weeds of the technology, but really focused on how that can deliver benefits.
I think there's a point in just returning to governance for one moment. I mean, for me, governance, you know, good governance is not an option. But I also strongly believe that I don't want to have a board which is being led by regulation and bureaucracy and red tape. We have to be led by the customer. The customer must dictate or must lead on our strategic intent. And then once we've got the strategic intent, it's then how do we make it compliant? So it's not compliance driven, it's customer driven. So I really want to make that point. The customer is at the heart of everything. And in terms of skills and perspectives, well, the person we're looking for to lead in this kind of area from a board perspective, of course, at the end of the day, the board has got to take collective responsibility. So the board has to understand, you know, the decisions that it's taking, and so that point that Caroline has made, that conversion of the complex to simplicity, so that all the board can sign up to it and take collective responsibility, is going to be critical going forward. And I also think, someone that can bring a wider perspective, whether that's from the housing sector, whether that's from outside the housing sector, but thinking more strategically, thinking longer term, thinking of how other people do it in other sectors, in other countries. What can they bring to give some fresh thinking in this area to B3?
Now, Caroline, I know that you came as a first-time non-exec to this board. Can you give me a sense of what sort of support do you provide for first-time non-execs or people coming from outside the housing sector as well?
I was very fortunate to have a very strong induction and onboarding to B3Living. So there's a number of things. Up front, it's having an induction. And yes, it ranges from doing some of the online training, having a buddy. But what I think was most important was the opportunities to meet customers and colleagues, not just when you start, but throughout the year. I'm constantly putting my hand up to be able to join a panel and hearing customers' views on whether we should increase our rent or by how much, or where we should be investing more. It's also been around hearing and understanding what their challenges are. So it really brings to life going from looking at some board papers, making a decision, but what does that mean for people on the ground? We also have annual reviews and appraisals, thinking about what it is that we are contributing to the board, and also collectively when we're looking at our committees and our boards, analysing ourselves or feeding back on ourselves. What are our skills gap? What could we be doing differently? So throughout the year, and not just as part of onboarding, there's lots of opportunities to get that step back, reflection, as well as support. So never felt alone. Very supportive environment here.
Andy's nodding away there. I know you've had a couple of new board members 6 months or so ago. So Andy, you've had the experience of bringing on those new Neds. Is there anything you'd like to add about how you support the first timers?
Having been a relatively new board member myself, the process through B3 was very, very strong. But it is a very welcoming environment. And certainly when I first walked through the door, just the way you're greeted by, the receptionist, the person from HR that comes down to sort of escort you, and the conversations you strike up was always very welcoming, very, very supportive. So that gives you a bit of an insight into the culture of the organisation. Because first impressions, they say, count a lot, and I'm a great believer in that. So it's fantastic to hear that people are supportive right through that process.
So how does the board ensure all members, regardless of their background, are heard and able to contribute confidently?
Firstly, it's general discussions at the board, and everybody in a safe environment can feel free to contribute, and indeed be asked to contribute. But I think there's also other things, that there's more away days where there's more, I think more of an even more relaxed atmosphere where people can feel more comfortable sort of contributing either, during the actual formal parts of that away day, or indeed, over coffee, biscuits, etc. I think the other thing that we're beginning to encourage more is more conversation outside the board. So it's not just I turn up at a board for 5 times a year and we have some conversations and make some decisions, but it's actually being more immersed into the business. And if there's a conversation that needs to be had in the meantime, then let's pick up the phone, let's pick up the teams, let's have a chat together and actually begin to create a story that we can begin to talk about at the next board. So I think those kinds of things are important as well. And then visits and events, whether that's community events, customer community events, whether it's going out and looking at buildings as we did recently, whether it's attending customer visits and knocking on doors, whatever it is, all of those things with other board members begin to break down the barriers, and people begin to more genuinely have ongoing conversations, which I believe then ends up in making better decisions when those are needed.
So for both of you personally, I guess, what has motivated you to join the board of B3Living? But also kind of what, now that you're there, Caroline, 5 years in, what sort of keeps you going?
I feel really satisfied about the impact that we're making for customers. One of the conversations I remember us having as a board was around the standards that we provide to our customers when they are moving into an empty property. And I was really struck by the depth and quality of the conversation in terms of understanding, well, some customers didn't have carpets. Some customers are moving in and they've got very little to start off with. And looking at the offer that we provide them and the decision that we made on that day, whether it's helping people with to set up, having carpets, having things to make them feel at home. And so it's really going up beyond the bricks and mortar. It's understanding sometimes there are customers who are in vulnerable situations, and it's small things that we can do to make a difference, not just at the start of having a home with us, but throughout that journey. So I'll say it's that satisfaction of seeing the impact. And now through to our rating. It was such a great piece of news mid last year to not only retain our G1 V1, but seeing our focus on customers reflected in that C1 rating as well. So that's one of the things that I find most satisfying, in addition to being exposed to all aspects of what it's like to run an organisation and taking you beyond your normal narrower area of expertise.
And Andy, can you tell us what does that mean, that G1, V1, C1? You've got the full 5 stars from the regulator there. Explain to us, what does that mean?
It's a fantastic achievement for the organisation and for everyone who works there, and indeed for our customers. I might argue that it's easy to get there, it's more difficult to stay there. So therefore, complacency has to go out the window, and we have to think about how now do we kick on? You know, how do we get better? Because as sure as eggs are eggs, in 5 years' time, our customers will be wanting more, they'll be wanting different, they'll be wanting better. And we've got to step up and continue to deliver and improve our services to our customers. So complacency isn't an option. So we have to kick on and move forward. But it's that ability to make a difference, you know, an ability to actually see those improvements and see those small improvements always nudging forward and making a difference to our customers. And seeing the response you get from customers, I think that's what really drives me forward into the future. An example the other day when we were out sort of inspecting our sort of taller buildings and all the communal areas, and you know, one customer came out and they'd been waiting for a repairs person to turn up. They didn't know when they were turning up. They had a doctor's appointment they had to get to. They were worried about, you know, how they, you know, would they be out when the repair person came, etc. And the B3 person just went straight in there, got on the phone, spoke to repairs, got it all sorted, got an exact time of when the guy would be there. And the thank you from the customer in terms of how pleased they were and how relieved they were was just brilliant to see. So it's those kinds of improvements that you see that really make me sort of value what we do.
So finally, to both of you, what advice would you give someone if they were considering applying to join the board of B3Living?
Well, I guess from my perspective, if you can use your skills and experience and knowledge to make a difference to others, why wouldn't you?
Thank you, Andy. Caroline?
I would say don't count yourself out. We're looking for someone from a wide range of backgrounds. On the board, we've got people who work in housing, property, education. And I'd also say if you're a first timer considering it, and also if you're perhaps a woman, you need more women on the board. Don't let anything put you off. So please put yourself forward. Don't count yourself out.
For anyone watching this, good luck if you're considering applying to the board of B3Living. Wherever you're watching this video, there'll be a link below where you can click on the link and see all the details, remuneration information about how to apply. And if you've got any questions, there's a contact for Hannah at Nemail Search who you can reach out to with any questions about the role. Thank you so much, Caroline and Andy.